Well, what do you know? Magnets aren't just for MRIs anymore. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam. I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 39 years and then some. Recently, I told you I had signed up for and was accepted to participate in a clinical trial that's looking at the effect of aerobic exercise, particularly increased heart rate, on multiple sclerosis. That has made me more aware of the other research that's being done that's related to that at all. I came across a study recently that I wanted to share with you because it's very interesting and different. It makes use of something that we're all familiar with, and I was intrigued because, once again, exercise seems to play a part in the clinical trial that's being done on this. This article I saw in Multiple Sclerosis News Today, and it was published on February 23rd, 2024. It's called Magnetic Brain Stimulation Aids Motor Function and Balance in MS Trial. Non-invasive RTMS was paired with intensive rehab program in study. And non-invasive means that they don't put anything inside your body, so you don't have any electrodes in you or anything like that. It's all stuff that's on the surface, which is nice. And as they say, coupling a non-invasive brain stimulation procedure with an intensive rehabilitation program significantly improved motor function and balance in adults with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, a randomized clinical trial finds. High-frequency repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, or RTMS, is a non-invasive treatment approach that delivers pulses of magnetic fields to modulate nerve cell activity in the brain. It also improves the integrity of the brain's white matter, which is damaged in multiple sclerosis. Well, that in itself is kind of intriguing, that it improves the integrity of the white matter. So it actually must be making some kind of physical change. The study, Effect of High-Frequency Repetitive Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, RTMS, on the balance and the white matter integrity in patients with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, a long-term follow-up study, was published in the journal Multiple Sclerosis and Related Disorders. And there's a link there, so you can click on that if you want to and actually look at the article itself, which we won't do here, but if you're interested, I'd encourage you to take a look. MS is an inflammatory disorder marked by damage to the myelin sheath, the protective coating around nerve fibers in the brain and spinal cord. MS symptoms and severity vary widely depending on which region of the nervous system is affected. In about 1/3 of MS patients, the cerebellum, or little brain, a structure at the bottom back of the brain, is damaged. Because the cerebellum's primary function is muscle control, including balance and movement, more than 40% of patients have a lack of coordination called ataxia. And I know that I do have some damage to that part of my brain because I do have ataxia. I've also had some unsynchronized swallowing problems, different things that doctors have told me were the result of damage to the cerebellum. RTMS is designed to modulate electrical signals in the brain using a magnetic field. An electrical coil is placed near the scalp, which delivers pulses of magnetic fields to specific brain regions. And I'm not going to click on this link, but you'll notice there's a study here that also came out fairly recently. Brain stimulation may offer promise for spasticity in MS. So brain stimulation does seem to be something that's offering a number of positive benefits for those of us with MS. Very interesting. Treating motor function with RTMS. A research team led by scientists at the Suez Canal University in Egypt explored whether delivering high-frequency RTMS to the cerebellum could be a potential treatment for truncal ataxia, which affects the trunk in adults with relapsing MS. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first study that addresses the effect of rTMS on cerebellar ataxia in relapsing remitting MS patients, the researchers wrote. A total of 43 participants ages 20 to 40 were randomly assigned to one cycle of rTMS or a sham procedure that included 12 sessions over 4 weeks. In each session, rTMS involved 20 trains of 50 magnetic stimuli, spaced 20 seconds apart, using a coil over the cerebellum. The sham group underwent the same procedure using a different coil that mimicked the sounds of rTMS. Well, that's pretty clever, because I was wondering how you could pretend to be doing this procedure, but it looks like they thought ahead on that, so the sham is actually pretty convincing. Then all the participants received 4 rTMS treatment cycles, also consisting of 12 sessions across 4 weeks within a 2-month interval between cycles. Well, that's interesting. So they actually, even the sham group, got some rTMS. I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind that is. Maybe they'll say here in a minute. Throughout the trial, the participants could continue to receive their standard MS therapies, and all participated in a rigorous rehabilitation program that included balance exercises, lower back stabilization, gait training, and motor relearning skills. And that in itself is excellent. The exercise alone is really, really valuable. Motor function was assessed with the 10-meter walking test, which measures how fast a person can walk 10 meters. And balance was measured during the time up and go, or tug test, and the Berg Balance Scale, or BBS. MRI scans assessed changes in the cerebellum. After 4 weeks, rTMS-treated patients had significant improvements across all motor function and balance measures compared with sham treatment. The mean walking speed improved by 15.6%, and that's quite significant, while the scores for tug improved by 10.1% and 18.3% for BBS. No significant changes were found in the sham group. The patients reported only mild and transient side effects, which included nausea, headache, and dizziness. Now, here's something interesting. The sham group got the exercise also, and they're saying that didn't seem to do any good on its own. And I would question that, because study after study has shown that exercise improves our MS symptoms. The integrity of the cerebellum white matter, called because it contains a lot of myelinated nerve fibers, was assessed using MRI scans. 2 white matter nerve fiber tracts were examined, one leading out of the cerebellum, called the cerebello-thalamocortical tract, or CTC, and one leading in, the corticopontocerebellar, or CPC, tract. rTMS sessions significantly increased the mean values of fractional anisotropy, an MRI measure that reflects myelin integrity and the size and density of nerve fibers. The sham group showed no changes. The benefits continued to be observed across all measures in the open label part, where all participants received rTMS, with improvements seen in BBS, tug, and 10-meter walk scores. With long-term treatment, white matter integrity was also significantly improved in the CPC and CTC on both sides of the cerebellum. High-frequency rTMS is safe and effective in treatment of truncal ataxia in relapsing remitting MS patients, the scientists said. It has a positive effect on walking speed over a short distance, as well as the balance when combined with intensive rehabilitation techniques. Well, by now you're probably trying to picture in your minds, well, what is this stuff really all about? And I found a video that I'm going to play for you because it describes it pretty well.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Neuroscience Methods 101. Today we are going to discuss repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is abbreviated as rTMS. The magnetic field on the head can induce a small electric field in the brain, which activates neurons, meaning that action potentials can be induced. Now, the effects of a single TMS pulse last only for a fraction of a second. But researchers started to ask the question, if we would repetitively use TMS pulses, could we maybe activate neurons for a longer time? In other words, can we change the activity of the brain for a while even after the stimulation is over? This repetitive use of TMS, unsurprisingly, is called repetitive TMS, or rTMS. Conventional rTMS paradigms include low-frequency rTMS and high-frequency rTMS. During low-frequency rTMS, stimulation is given at a low frequency, typically about 1 pulse per second, and this is done for anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. On the other hand, high-frequency rTMS uses much faster pulses, typically 10 or 20 per second, and this is repeated for 2 to 4 seconds. Between these trains of 2 to 4 seconds, there is a rest period of about 20 seconds. This pattern is then repeated for again anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes. Research in animals has suggested that fast pulses, such as applied during high-frequency rTMS, can induce synaptic plasticity, meaning that the connections in the brain become stronger, and this is thought to overall activate the brain. Indeed, various studies have found that high-frequency rTMS can increase brain activity for around 60 minutes. Besides conventional rTMS, there are also so-called patterned paradigms, like theta burst stimulation and quadripulse stimulation. Particularly theta burst stimulation has gained popularity, since it seems to have the same effect as conventional rTMS, but it is much faster. During theta burst stimulation, very fast bursts of 3 pulses are applied, and these bursts are repeated 5 times per second. What we have discussed so far are the effects of a single session of rTMS. But what happens if you do this every day for several weeks? Well, this is exactly what studies have tried for treating various psychiatric and neurological disorders, including major depressive disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, addiction, and various movement disabilities. It is difficult to objectively record changes over such a long time, since brain physiology is changing from day to day anyway. So investigation of long-term effects has mostly relied on subjective reports of symptoms. Based on the available data, multiple weeks of rTMS can have lasting effects, sometimes for up to a few months and sometimes even a few years. But more systematic, longitudinal studies are definitely required.
So now that we have that figured out and we know what we're talking about and we can kind of picture in our minds what it might involve, I guess now we're going to be seeing how this goes. Let's just go out and look at the clinicaltrials.gov page that covers this topic. And as you can see here, I searched for multiple sclerosis and rTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, and here's what I found. There are a number of different studies that have been done or are being done. And we'll come back to this first one because that's the one I really want to highlight. But as you can see, here's one that has unknown status, and it's actually out of France. And this one is completed. This was out of Germany. There's this one here was suspended, and it said, I looked into it, it said it was suspended for technical problems, so I don't really know what that is. But maybe something with the design, or as they started to implement it, they realized that they weren't going to be collecting good data. But that was out of Serbia. And there's this one that's recruiting. But this is particularly for depression. So this one is recruiting it's out of Canada. You might be interested in that. It is recruiting right now. And this one is also recruiting. And it's looking at overactive bladder, and it's in Houston, Texas. So that's another one you might be interested in. And then this one is unknown status, and that is out of Istanbul, Turkey. Again, bladder dysfunction is really what they're looking at. And another unknown status for depression and anxiety. And the status is so unknown they don't even say where it's located or anything much about it. And then other unknown status out of Chicago, Illinois. And we are looking here at traumatic brain injury and stroke. The little footnote here at the bottom, study has passed its completion date and status has not been verified in more than 2 years. That applies to this one here, and this one here, and this one here. So that must be what unknown really is referring to. Oh wait, here's one more that's also unknown because of 2 years having passed and we don't know what the status is. But we go all the way up to this number 1. And this one is not yet recruiting, but it looks to me to be sort of a follow-on maybe for the one that was done already. And that one came out of Egypt. If we go and look at this one, and we scroll down to try and get an idea of where it's from, it says the sponsor is Cairo University, and the information is coming out of Cairo University. Therefore, the study looks to be a follow-on from the one that was completed and results were published that we've just been looking at. The study's description is to determine the efficacy, so how effective the high-frequency cerebellar repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation is on coordination with patients with multiple sclerosis. So we're still kind of looking at ataxia and movement sorts of problems. They're going to have 40 participants, and it's going to be randomized. So it's double blind. Now, the other one was only single blind, so that may be what they had to do was do a double blind test to make it as bulletproof from the peer review perspective as possible. They're estimating the completion of the study June of 2024, so that's not very far away at all. There are going to be 2 arms. There's the comparator arm and the sham arm, just like in the other study that we just talked about. As I mentioned as we were going through the article, I was a little surprised that the group in the trial that was also getting aerobic exercise along with the RTMS did not seem to have any increased effect over just getting the RTMS, and that seemed weird to me. I just somehow intuitively that doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course, me being me, I have to wonder about using magnets and if MRI use of magnets is considered safe. And believe me, I looked at many websites and I keep seeing over and over again, oh, it's not ionizing radiation, it's just magnetic, and all it does is align the atoms in your body so it doesn't cause any damage. And I assume that this RTMS is a similar idea, but I will, of course, look into this a little bit more because you just have to wonder. This magnet is pretty powerful, and if it's going to make changes, which the MRI, they say, doesn't make any lasting changes. If this RTMS does, there's something different going on, and I'm going to look into that. So I'm just going to keep an eye on this. But you might be interested in it yourself. You might want to be thinking about whether this is something that you could get interested in, participating in a trial or asking your doctor about. You just never know. I am always up for things that do not involve pharmaceuticals. And there's not as many of those as I wish there were. So this one is intriguing to me. But tell me in the comments if this is something that you would be interested in or that you even know something about. Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe you've been involved in some kind of a thing. Maybe you've had this kind of therapy or you know someone who has. I'd really love to know. But that's all I have for you today. So until my next video, of course, regardless of what else you're doing with your life, make sure you take really good care of yourself. I'll see you again soon.